Welcome to Tarek Talk, a podcast exploring art, culture, and the stories that shape creative lives. I'm your host, Tarek Mendes, and each episode I sit down with artists and creative thinkers to talk about process, inspiration, and the moments that shape who we become. Thanks for being here. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome back to Tarek Talk. Walking into the Whitney Museum during the 2026 Biennial, you're immediately aware that this exhibition is about how identities are shaped, constructed, negotiated, and constantly evolving. The Whitney itself, with its exposed materials, open floors, and visible structure, feels like an extension of that idea. It's a building that doesn't hide how it's made, and in many ways, neither do the artists inside. Curated by Marcela Guerrero and Drew Sawyer, this biennial is grounded in the complexity of the present moment. It brings together artists who are examining systems, social, cultural, economic, and asking how those systems shape the way we understand ourselves and each other. And CFGNY's work sits right at the intersection of those questions. CFGNY is a Brooklyn-based collective made up of Daniel Chu, Ten Izu, Kirsten Kilponen, and Tin Nguyen. Since forming in 2016, they've developed a practice that moves fluidly between installation, sculpture, performance, and fashion. Their work is both critical and playful, using humor and material experimentation to unpack ideas around Asian identity and global culture. At first glance, their installation in the Whitney Biennial feels almost provisional. It's built from wood boards and translucent plastic, materials you might associate with construction sites or temporary structures. There's a sense that the work is unfinished or in the process of becoming. And that's exactly the point. CFGNY uses these materials intentionally, choosing elements that are usually hidden, cleaned up, or covered over in finished architecture. By exposing them, they create a visual language that speaks to identity as something that is never fixed, something that is always being built, adjusted, and redefined. Within this structure, you encounter a series of objects that feel both familiar and strange. Porcelain sculptures are cast from the negative space between made in China dollar store items. These are objects that circulate globally, cheap, mass-produced, often overlooked. But instead of reproducing the objects themselves, CFGNY focuses on the space between them. That shift is subtle but powerful. By casting the negative space, they transform absence into presence. What is usually invisible becomes the object of attention. It's a gesture that mirrors the way certain identities are often defined, not by what they are, but by how they are perceived, categorized, or reduced. There's also a playful element in the work. A stuffed animal soft sculpture appears within the installation, adding a layer of softness, humor, and even nostalgia. But like everything in this environment, it's not just decorative. It's part of a larger conversation about consumption, production, and cultural imagery. And that conversation extends into history. CFGNY's installation considers the global systems of trade that have shaped how objects and people circulate across borders. The phrase "made in China" becomes more than a label. It becomes a marker of economic systems, labor histories, and the ways race and identity are assigned within those systems. The work asks you to think about how these categories are constructed, how they are reinforced, and how they might be reimagined. Within the Whitney Biennial, this installation resonates deeply. This exhibition is concerned with relationality, how we exist within networks of power, culture, and history. CFGNY brings those networks into focus, showing how identity is not something stable or singular, but something shaped by multiple forces at once. The Whitney's architecture amplifies this idea. The exposed beams, the industrial materials, the openness of the space all echo the unfinished quality of CFGNY's installation. You move through it not as a passive viewer, but as someone navigating a structure that is still in progress. And that experience stays with you, because CFGNY's work doesn't offer a fixed definition of identity. Instead, it reveals it as something fluid, something constructed, something always in motion. And within the Whitney Biennial 2026, that realization becomes part of a larger understanding that the systems shaping who we are not permanent. They are built, and they can be rebuilt. Thank you for spending this time with me on Tarek Talk. If this conversation resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe and share the episode. You can follow along on social media for behind-the-scenes moments, guest highlights, and what's coming next.